Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my lecture on DTDs for publishing. This lecture is part of my XML for Libraries course at UWM, although some of you may have simply found your way here on YouTube, and you're certainly welcome to stay. We've already developed a DTD for an XML document that has the style of a data interchange document. And now we want to do one for one that has more of the style of a publishing document. So you may recall from an earlier chapter and lecture that we built a procedure document as our kind of example of a publishing style XML document. And here we're seeing it again, pretty much the way we left it last time. So it's a full-blown XML document with an XML declaration. It now has a doc type that points it to the DTD, ex_4.8.dtd, and you will you'll know that because we don't see any HTTP protocol at the beginning of that file name, and because we don't see any path expression, that we're expecting the DTD to be in the same directory as the XML document itself. So the root is a procedure, and we begin with metadata type elements, including title, author, department, revision date. We have an abstract, which just has a lot of text in it now. And then as we go to slide number 123, we see we close the abstract and we close the procedure. And we're going to build up the document the same way that we did when we were learning to author and design it. And we're going to at the same time be documenting the schema for the document in a DTD. So let's take a peek at the DTD for the document as it currently exists. So we've got declarations here on slide 124 for a bunch of elements. And the top level element is procedure. And we can see from the declaration that it's content model, which is the part that appears inside of the parentheses. It says that a procedure is composed of a title, an author, a department, a revision date, and an abstract. And because of the way that we've expressed these with intervening commas, you will recall from the last of the DTDs that we did that we are expecting these fields to be required and always in this order. Okay? And then the rest of the declarations, the one for title and author and department and revision date and abstract, have really the simplest of content models. Within the parens where we express the content model, we see #PC data, which you will recall is regular old XML text. So no sub-elements yet. Okay? So that is the DTD that goes with the document in its current state of development. And if we were to bring these two documents up in an XML editor with a validating parser, one like Oxygen XML, like we're using in our course, we would be able to validate the document, and it would be valid. Okay? So let's go up to the next step in the design of the document. Oh, before we do that, let's just note a couple of comments from slide number 125. The DTD language itself allows for liberal white space. Spaces encourage returns. Okay? And the same can be true for text in a regular old content-oriented XML document. So if we page back and we look at the DTD, we can see that I've spread out the declaration for the element procedure over multiple lines to make it easier to see what the component elements are in the content model. And this isn't a thing that you have to do, but it's a pretty good practice. And you can see I've got a blank line. That works. And if we take a peek back at the XML document itself, you can see that I've got quite a bit of white space that I put in just to make it readable for humans. Okay? So both XML documents, which we already knew, and now DTDs, are pretty tolerant of extra white space, which makes it easier for us to author these things in a way that makes them easy to read. Okay, now this next step is the same step that we used when we were learning how to author this kind of a document. So we've made some changes, okay? The first change that you'll see is that in the department element, where it said research and development, we decided to use an ampersand. And just like we were doing before, we have used a general entity reference, ampersand AMP semicolon, and that is the way that we represent an ampersand in XML text, because unescaped less than signs and ampersands are not allowed in XML text. We have to replace them with these two general entity references. And you'll see that down here in the first paragraph, and paragraph is a new construct. So we had in the last version, we had just open text within the abstract, and it was formed into visual paragraphs, if you will, but it didn't have any elements that divided into paragraphs. And now we've surrounded each of the paragraphs with a paragraph element. And then at the very end of the first paragraph, you can see that we have a less than. It says less than 18 months. And of course, we can't have any unescaped less than signs. So we've used, again, the general entity reference ampersand LT semicolon. And up at the top of that paragraph, you can see that we've given you an example of how to use a character reference to get in symbols and characters that are not on your keyboard. So we've used a character reference, which is the one that's associated with the registered trademark symbol, and that is ampersand #174 semicolon, which again is going to get us the registered trademark symbol. And then when we go to the second slide of our document, we can see, well, we've created a second paragraph, which is good. And we have actually added another element called details, which is going to hold a lot of content eventually, but for right now, it just has some placeholder text. The detailed procedure will go right here. So let's see what, if anything, we had to do to the DTD in order to accommodate the changes that we made in the design of the document. Okay, so let's look at the element declaration for procedure, and I think we've added details. Okay, in any case, yeah, I don't think we had that before. So now we've got details, and if you look down at the bottom, we do have a declaration for details, and we said that it's just # PC data, plain old text, and that's all we have in there now. And the rest of the declarations stayed the same, except for abstract, because you will recall that we divided up the text in the abstract element into paragraph elements. And so we need to change the content model for abstract. And if you take a look at that, it says paragraph asterisk, which means one or more occurrences of the element paragraph. So abstracts are made up of paragraphs. And what's the declaration that we have for a paragraph? Well, a plain old PC data. So included in PC data are all the characters that you can type, plus the ones that you can insert with either general entity references or character references. So this DTD, again, if you take this version of the DTD and this version of the XML document and you validate the document, it's going to pass. So, a couple of comments. In their simplest form, paragraphs contain only # PC data, plain old XML text. The built-in general entities, the one for less than, the one for ampersand, the one for greater than, the one for apostrophe, and the one for quote, may be used in entity references without making any declarations in the DTD. So you can see that we didn't have to put anything into the DTD to be able to use these because they are built in. And that's also true for character references like the registered trademark symbol, which we were able to get in with ampersand #174 semicolon. Okay, so not a lot of changes in the DTD, just the changes that we saw to allow for explicit division with paragraph elements. Okay, now the one challenging aspect here is we move to the next version of the document. The one challenging aspect of XML documents that are used for publishing is this mixed content approach. And this we can see on slide 130 when we look at the first paragraph within abstract. And we can see that the phrase Larkin trademark symbol 2424 CNC router, that phrase has been surrounded by an equipment element. Okay? So within the running text, we can take some word or phrase and we can give them further meaning by surrounding them with a sub-element, in this case, equipment. And if we look down in the second paragraph, we'll see that we have yet another phrase, Teflon spray, which we are considering a supply that you have to use in the procedure. and we have surrounded it with the element supply. So this is mixed content. Now, how did we have to change the DTD to make this happen? Well, we've only made a change within paragraph. So let's go down and look at the declaration for paragraph. And this is the first time that we see a DTD element declaration for a mixed content element. And it has a special form. First of all, it makes use of this choice construct, where we're saying that that the contents are going to be this or that or some third thing. So what are the contents? Well, either #PC data, plain old XML text, or an equipment subelement or a supply subelement. And the only tricky thing is that on the outside of the parentheses, we have an asterisk which says these can occur 0 or more times. So if you really think at what it's like to be parsing through the text that's in a mixed content element, you're going to come to either a run of text or the equipment subelement or a supply subelement. And you're going to do that over and over again. If you look at the next stretch of text, it's either going to be plain old XML text or an equipment subelement or a supply subelement. Or it could be empty, which means that those things would occur 0 times, hence the asterisk rather than the plus. So this conceptual framework is one that we use even when we get to W3C XML schemas. The way that we describe mixed content elements in W3C XML schemas is really very similar to this. So I think it's a great conceptual model for it. Again, as you're going through the paragraph or whatever it is within the element, you're either going to come across a string of #PC data text, or you might encounter an equipment subelement, or you might encounter a supply subelement. And that's going to happen over and over again until you exhaust the content that is inside the element, in this case, a paragraph. So, comments on this. More complex paragraphs contain mixed content. This is pretty typical of a publishing application. The content model for mixed content is just the construct I talked about a minute ago. The first choice is always #PC data, and it has to be in that first position. Even though we describe this in a way to say, well, it's either going to be PC data or element 1 or element 2 or element 3, well, you would think that, the order wouldn't really matter. But in order to get the tools to recognize this as a declaration that this is mixed content, you really have to use this magic order of things that puts #PC data first. Now, the sub-elements that we've used so far, which I'm calling modifying elements, because they sort of modify the text that they surround and they give them a special meaning. At this point, these only contain text. So for right now, they only have to have a model of #PC data. If, in fact, we wanted the sub-elements to have the ability to have mixed content themselves, and this happens quite frequently in publishing applications, all we need to do is to use the magic construct for mixed content when we define the sub-elements. And so we would give them a choice of # PC data or element 1 or element 2, etc., where those would be the sub-elements that could occur within that element. Okay? So we can have mixed content within mixed content. And this happens reasonably frequently within publishing applications. Okay, so now we've come to the finishing touches for the document here on slide 134. And you can see here that, what have we done? Well, we haven't changed too much. I don't see a lot that's changed on slide 134. So let's look at 135. Okay, on slide number 135, you see that we're putting more information in the last of the elements, the details. So let's see, it has a frequency and a duration. And those kind of have the style of data interchange in a way. There's no mixed content or anything like that. Then we have a steps element that's going to hold a repeating group of step. Each step has a name attribute. And then from inside the steps are made up of paragraphs. Okay, so that's slide number 135. And then on slide number 136, we see more of the same, more steps. And most of the text inside of a step is inside of a paragraph. But you can see that we're using the same mixed content definition for paragraph that we used for paragraph when it was used within the abstract. And this is the thing that you'll often see in these kind of documents where there might be a set of elements like a paragraph with sub-elements like equipment, supply, warning that we see here in the middle step. And that we want to be able to use these in two contexts, one in the step context and the other in the abstract context. And if we can agree that the rules are going to be the same for these elements, then there's nothing to keep us from using the tags in two contexts within our document. Okay, and then we come to the end of it. So we end the last step, we end steps, we end detail, we end procedure. Okay, let's look at some comments. So the declaration for the element procedure remains the same. Oh no, we've added a couple things. We've added a department and revision date. Okay, and if we look down at the declarations for those individual elements, they're holding just plain old # PC data, so that's pretty easy. Then if we look a little bit lower down, we have the declaration for abstract, 0 or more paragraphs. But if you look at the declaration for paragraph, because we want to, all of a sudden, we would like to be able to use the sub-element warning, we've decided that we're going to allow warnings in any paragraph, whether that paragraph is located in a step or whether it's located in an abstract. And this is usually the easiest thing to do. And what it really comes down to is having a sort of a consistent set of semantics for the way an element like a paragraph is going to behave. So the easiest thing to do if you're going to reuse an element like a paragraph is to have kind of a general concept of how it works that's general enough that it can work in the two contexts in which you want to use it. Okay, so we've got one more choice in the declaration for paragraph. We've added the warning subelement. And if you look down at the declarations for equipment, supply, and warning, you will note that we're not allowing any of those to be mixed content themselves. They only can have plain old XML text because they've got the content model #PC data. Now let's look down at details, okay? So in details, which in the last version we had as #PC data, now we're saying that we're going to have a frequency, a duration, and then steps, okay? And those are all required and all happen in that order. Then we have the declaration for frequency and for duration, and we say that those are going to hold just plain XML text. And then we have we have the declaration for steps that says simply it's going to have 0 or more occurrences of step. And here in a couple places, I have had the choice, am I going to say steps contains 1 or more step, or steps contains 0 or more steps? And there's really two schools of thought. I like what I chose, which is to use the asterisk and say 0 or more, because typically when I start, I don't have any steps at all. There are some people who like to say 1 or more because some of the tools like Oxygen XML editor, if you say there has to be at least 1 step, as soon as you insert a steps, it will insert the tags for the first step. And people find that advantageous. So one could either use a plus here or could use an asterisk, and it's really a matter of style and preference. And then we have the declaration for a step, which is 0 or more paragraphs. And step has an attribute list, and the attribute is called name, and it's C data, plain old XML text, and it's required. Okay, so with just a little more patching up, we got everything to work. If we take this, DTD, which is now a 2-pager, right, 2 slides, and we use it to validate the last version of the XML document that we have, it's going to validate. So let's cover a couple of comments. An element like paragraph will frequently appear as a child of more than one type of element. Okay, so in our case, it can occur as a child of abstract and as a child of step. For this to work, paragraphs and all of its mixed content modifying elements must be appropriate for all contexts in which they can appear. Okay? And this really, in my mind, gets back to meaning. Okay? If in fact paragraphs and the mixed element components are really kind of saying the same thing, doing the same thing within the document, then the likelihood that we can get by with one set of elements that we are reusing within step from abstract, then that's good. I think that's pretty highly likely. There are times where you go, oh, this is just a natural. These are paragraphs of text. They're all kind of text about the same thing. They can have the same kind of mixed content in them. Okay, so, and there are times when you might try to do something like this and you'll see that you're pushing too hard. Okay, so you look at, say, the content model for the concept, the content that's inside of a step, and you compare it to the content that's inside of an abstract, and the rules are just different, and the meaning is different, in which case you're going to have to not reuse a paragraph, but have two separate but similar paragraph-like elements. And our last comment here is, because we have a warning sub-element in the paragraphs that we had put under details, then we have to remember to add the modifying element warning to the content model for paragraph. And we also have to add an element declaration for warning itself. Okay, and again, that's only going to work if the rules for using warning are going to be the same in a step as they are in abstract. So that's it for this lecture. The mechanics of this are not very challenging, I think. It takes a little bit of extra thinking to get your head around why the declaration form that we use for mixed content works. Because we're really saying that there's a choice of either PC data or sub-element 1 or sub-element 2 or sub-element 3, and that choice occurs 0 or more times. If you can get your head around that concept, and you can understand how we can declare mixed content, then it's just a matter of really kind of understanding the meaning and the flow and the structure of these publishing-oriented XML documents. And that's, that I think really comes with experience. So give that some thought, and there's a tutorial coming up in the course, so you'll be able to give it a try. And I'll say bye until next time. Bye-bye.